Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is navigating the numbers, tariffs, AI, and the future of supply chains with my friend Corey DeSantis. How's it going, Corey?
Joe, it's going great. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Finally, we've been talking for a few years off and on about getting you on the podcast. It's not been easy. So I know you're a busy man. So Corey, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Absolutely. Corey DeSantis. I am with BDO. BDO is the fifth largest tax audit advisory firm in the United States. We have a national as well as a global presence. I am calling from the lovely city of Rivers and Bridges here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Very nice. Very nice. So you said BDO.
Yes.
I know the name because I have a friend of a friend who works at BDO here in Detroit. What do you guys do and who do you serve? What problems are you solving for your customers and what are you guys doing for them?
Absolutely. Specifically, I sit within our management consulting practice in our sourcing supply chain team. I primarily focus on manufacturers within about $500 million to $2-3 billion in revenue and helping them answer the question of how can I be even better than I am today? With a tax and audit lens, it's great because we can take a look at the financial piece, helping use those financial numbers to make those decisions, tying in with our management consulting practice with folks like myself with a deep industry background and helping solve and operationalize those problems. So it's a lot of very pragmatic, practical solutions in helping answer those questions for those manufacturers. We're really looking to improve and enhance their business over what it is today.
Yeah, but I know you also work with logistics companies. And when you say manufacturing, I never know whether manufacturing fits within supply chain or supply chain fits within manufacturing.
To answer the question, yes, absolutely. Because it's not just manufacturers that have supply chain. We also do work, like you said, with a number of logistics companies, because a piece of what we do here in our manufacturing practice is that strategy, helping to figure out who are my ideal customers, where can I play in the market, how can I grow? Because it's not just about driving revenue, it's also about driving growth and expansion.
Yep. I'm an automotive guy originally, and people call automotive manufacturing companies. And we call people who make computers or laptops, we call those technology companies. And what's interesting to me is they're still manufacturing companies. Apple is a manufacturing company, even though they're looked at as a technology company. Automotive could be looked at that. But I think when I started my career in automotive, we already had a very established supply chain base. It just happened to be mostly US, right? And over the last generation, we've moved it all over the world. The supply chains became global. You could just as easily call automotive a supply chain business, because so much of the value added now is with the supply chains. Now they always are doing the final production on their own for the most part, but it's a huge world, and I think it's not either or. They're doing manufacturing and they also have a supply chain. But there's a lot of other industries that say, yeah, we used to manufacture ourselves. Now we do the design and the marketing and the distribution, and somebody else does the manufacturing for us.
No, you said it exactly right. I don't think people appreciate that when you look at that new car, whatever OEM it is, the logistics to make that car happen. If you break down that car, yes, the OEM put it together, but every one of those subcomponents, even down to literally the nuts and bolts, someone somewhere had a procurement function to make sure that they were getting the best nuts and bolts at the right price, at the right quantity, at the right time. Everything, and I think automotive is a good industry to use as an example here because it's such a massive global enterprise. And not only that, you look at Apple, they're a manufacturer, but technology has changed and evolved in the last 20 years, really. And you look at automotive, a lot of this has evolved over 100 years. The way that we started with the Model T 100 plus years ago, the way that Ford rolls the Ford Bronco off of its assembly line here in the US, completely different. But fundamentally, it's taking those components, subcomponents, right place, right time, putting them together to get to an end customer.
Yeah. And back in the olden days, back in the Model T days, Ford was vertically integrated. They made everything for that car. And that's the nature of new industries. It's over time that we develop the supply chains that support all the logistics functions that we're all other way around. The logistics functions support the supply chains. Anyway, big changes right now going on for a lot of manufacturers because they're now wondering, will I continue to manufacture where I'm at? And this tariff, we'll get into the tariffs in a minute, but we didn't discuss it yet. But BDO is, their origins is finance and audit. And the hard part of all this is keeping track of the cost. When you have these global supply chains, manufacturing, they're notoriously difficult to keep a handle on the cost. It's really easy. Trust me, I come from automotive, to think you're making money on something only to have somebody with deep knowledge of finance come in and go, here's how much you're losing. You're like, no, we're making money.
And that's some of the hardest conversations that we have when these manufacturers, hey, the lights are on, bills are paid, everything's great. They're turning a profit. And you take a look at you take a look at some of the margins, and you see the look of just utter surprise across the boardroom of, we knew we were making money there. We didn't realize how much money we could be making if we changed XYZ. We also didn't realize how much money we weren't making or we were losing on products XYZ. When you start putting that financial lens on some of these customers that, hey, maybe you've had a long time standing relationship with this customer, that's great. However, it comes potentially at a cost. And that cost is typically at that bottom line of, you might be breaking even or potentially losing money with that.
Yep. This is way off track, but I'm going to say it anyway. I read a book about Henry Ford a long time ago. This is the original Henry Ford, the first. And he was a guy who loved being in the factory, loved making the cars, and he never liked his accounting people, just despised his accounting people. And every year the accounting team grew for good reason. It's complex. And so one day he got just really angry, and he went in and fired virtually everybody in the accounting. And one of the groups he fired was everyone involved with budgeting. Now you've got everything was on paper, obviously, back in the olden days. And so they had very few people. And what they started to say is, we got stacks and stacks of bills and stuff. And they started taking bills and weighing them and say, on average, a pound of bills is this much money. And they got remarkably accurate with their budgeting just by weighing the stacks of bills. And then slowly but surely, I think it was Edsel Ford said, slowly hire back the accounting guys. This isn't going to work forever. But I always thought, very inventive over there in the accounting department.
If you tried to pass that now, I could actually hear my colleagues in our insurance practice.
You're going to jail.
I could hear an ulcer growing in a few of them just from the thought of a company trying to say, yeah, we don't count anything. We just weigh it. That's about right.
We weigh, this was 16 pounds of bills. That's about $4 million. give or take. Anyway, so Corey, tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you joined the mothership BDO.
Sure. Western PA native. Grew up in Erie, PA, right on the shores of Lake Erie. Went to school for my undergraduate degree at Slippery Rock University, about an hour north of Pittsburgh. After graduating, decided to make Pittsburgh my home. Then shortly after college, I like so many others, found my way into logistics. Worked at one of the largest 3PLs here in North America. Then wanted to get more into the transportation operations side and worked for another leading 4PL here in Pittsburgh. Then had a career as an asset carrier, working for one of the largest open deck carriers here in North America. That was, I have to say, talking about career highlights, I worked there during COVID, and I'm one of my biggest disappointments is I can't find it. But during COVID, we were issued a letter that made sure that we were deemed an essential employee. We weren't sure how things are going to go, so everybody had to carry this should travel be restricted. And I remember for about 3-4 months having to carry this with me. And that was probably one of the, looking back, hands down, one of my biggest career highlights of being part of the collective organization, the logistics of America, logistics of the world, keeping things moving in spite of having this global pandemic. So working there, I think, was probably one of my most proud moments, seeing how people still kept things moving in face of adversity like that.
Yep. You'll tell your great grandchildren those stories, because I have a daughter and she worked in one of the vaccine companies, and I said, you don't think of it today as solving or helping end a pandemic, but that's what you're doing. You're a little small piece of the pie.
Absolutely.
Plus, somebody had to bring the red wine over to Costco and the Doritos to Myers so I could sit over here and gain weight during the pandemic.
We were bringing the lumber to make sure that your new deck looked great, and making sure that we had the replenish the tin cans to make sure that the stores got stocked again. So similar, but not. We didn't quite have the luxury of the fine wines and the junk foods bringing to people, but still important.
Yeah, the fine Kirkland wine. So, Corey, when and why did you join BDO?
Sure. So I joined BDO almost 3 years ago now, and immediately before here, most of my career before BDO spent a lot of time working in the logistics of manufacturing
You
for.
get us.
Yep. A lot of, there is nothing that puts a shiver down your spine when you get an email from one of the OEMs saying shut down load. Okay, we got you. It'll be there before you need it. So seeing the challenges that these manufacturers were having, and that it ultimately they were struggling to strike a balance between the right price for the right level of service, and knowing that logistics is a financial function. At the end of the day, yes, product needs to show up, it needs to move, but you're also still responsible for holding the company credit card, and trying to strike that balance of, yes, I need it. I can't, I need to be at market rates or somehow see more value. And I started to see that it was not, this was endemic across many manufacturers, and it was agnostic of size, meaning even the largest, most sophisticated global operations were still struggling with the same problems you'd see at maybe a $30-40 million manufacturer. They did not go away.
Yep. And we also, to the credit of the industry, we did a pretty good job. Now, there was areas that we saw some brittleness during COVID. And I think now we talked about resilience before we hit the record button. And I think we did a pretty good job, but we also saw the weaknesses of our supply chain, the places where it was a little brittle. And now I think we've been working towards the supply chains, have been working towards getting a little more resilience. And the challenge, I think, is they depend on a lot of logistics companies. And so if you're a manufacturer right now, the cost of shipping has gone down. Life is good. If you're on the logistics side, you're like, how many years is it going to be down? It was very profitable during COVID, anything but since. I think it's just been flat. It hit rock bottom from what I understand, and we're now just hovering along the bottom of the floor. And I think at the same time, the manufacturers that we all work with, the distributors we work with, retailers we work with say, we want more resilience. We want to make sure that we don't have any of those problems of the past. And that's easy to come up with some of those things in a good market, a little less easy in a down market like we're in.
Absolutely. And I had an article published in Supply Chain Management Review on this, because you need to make sure that whatever you do in a up market, down market as a shipper, you stay consistent when managing logistics, because when the market was favorable to the shipper, you'd see routing guides hold for 12, 18 months, resistance to doing your typical annual RFP event because the rates were favorable. The second rates became unfavorable, that's when procurement in logistics became a little bit more reactive. Your quarterly, biannual RFPs, trying to continue that exercise of where can I shave money. I wrote an article saying that is a suboptimal way of doing business, because what's going to happen is your shippers will very much recognize, your carriers will recognize, regardless of mode, if you're the shipper that, hey, every year we put it to market, good or bad, we manage lanes above market rate or that are poor service, we can put those out to bid and be a little bit more tactical. But from a strategic perspective, every August 1, expect an email from us, from our 3PL, that we're going out to bid. That's how it's going to be. That's looked a little bit more favorably upon than, hey, you hold rates when it's in favor for you, but you want us to cut rates when it's our favor. Not saying that any shipper should be paying above market rates. No, but they should have a strategy that's consistent regardless of the cycle of the market.
So true, Corey. I always say I like long-term relationships. I believe long-term relationships where you can honestly say, hey, Corey, the rates have all come down. I think you're a little high. We don't want to get rid of you guys. I don't want to go market test you against everybody and waste the whole industry's time. But can you help us out? And then when times are the other way, where the rates are going up, you say, hey, Joe, let me explain why rates are going up. That's so much better than, and by the way, there's nothing that logistics companies hate more than getting a call from a guy who says, hey, could you just give me some rates on this? And you're like, am I actually have a chance to win these? Or is this just market testing your current guys? Nobody likes that. Just around the beginning of COVID, I got a call from a very big shipper. And he called and said, Joe, I think that the rates are going to drop through the floor because of COVID. And I was like, yeah, maybe. He goes, I'm not super comfortable doing it, but I'm thinking of going to our 3PL. I know them very well. And he said, I'm torn because I don't want to be that guy. And then we talked. I go, I wouldn't do it. The way you always described the relationship. And by the way, had he gone and said, hey, fellas, you got to cut your rates, blah, blah, blah. Here's why you need to. A month later, when rates skyrocketed through the roof. Yeah, doesn't work out quite right. So anyway, while we're trying to build all this resilience and still licking our wounds from COVID, and again, many logistics companies, a lot of freight brokers went out of business, a lot of carriers went out of business, people shedding trucks, warehousing companies, tight margins. We got the tariff thing. And now all of a sudden, this doesn't hit the over the road guys, but it ultimately is going to impact the way we all do business. Corey, talk about what in the tariff stuff. Describe the challenges rather than what you guys are doing.
Joe, interestingly enough, the tariffs ultimately will impact the over the road full truckload LTL, because what's going to happen is if there's, right now we're seeing a pretty challenged market in terms of you really don't know, have a set answer for what tariffs are going to be from what country, for what price, when are they going to be enacted. There's been a lot of back and forth with that. But that doesn't
uncertainty,
a great deal of uncertainty, but that doesn't stop a manufacturer sitting here in the United States from saying, I have product I need to bring in from China. I have manufacturers coming that have components coming from Malaysia. I have raw materials coming from Europe. I can't just shut those off. So to work on those tariffs, it's to understand the impact. And again, looking at it from a financial lens, what is the dollars and cents? We hear X, Y% almost flip daily sometimes. And that helps drive the conversation of what does that mean to me? Not just today, but tomorrow, but a month from now. What is the impact going to be to my bottom line? And what we're hearing from a lot of leaders of these manufacturing companies is they are now getting in a position to be more proactive. But before, earlier in this year, it was reactive. Hey, what can I do to make sure that I'm not paying 20%, 25% duties on what's designated as an aluminum article coming in from Canada? It's here's a better picture of my network. Help me form this up. Help me understand where my greatest risk is. And then help me develop some strategies to make sure that I'm de-risking those areas. Because again, it's not necessarily just wholesale, stop everything. It's a very measured, careful approach grounded in that financial perspective of this may or may not impact the bottom line, but we still have to invest time and energy and resources today to understand if it does, what is the depth of that impact?
Yep. I had Sal Mercogliano on my podcast. He does the What's Going On in Shipping YouTube channel, which is like 500,000 people in the subscribers. And he's very knowledgeable. He's a historian, but he's also a merchant marine and worked in this industry for a long time. And he's described what's going on with the tariffs is the equivalent of his Italian grandma slapping him upside the head to get his attention. And it wasn't child abuse back in the olden days.
Absolutely not.
And so I think what's happening is we're decoupling a little bit from China, and I think we're just relooking at some of this stuff. I think we're ultimately, I hope for all of our sakes, that we're going to have a better relationship with China, but things are changing there. By the way, they haven't been the lowest cost provider for a while. Mexico's less expensive, but the factories are there. And building a brand new factory, getting the infrastructure for a new factory, getting permission, developing the workforce, those are not overnight decisions. You can move capacity from one supplier to another supplier. Sometimes you can do that very quickly. Opening a brand new car production facility, very different than what we're talking about. Some things can happen very quickly. Some things a little longer is my point.
Oh, no doubt. And not only that, but when we talk about, like you said, if you look at China and say, hey, we have resources in China, Vietnam, wherever, we'd like to, depending on the favorability of the tariffs, we'd like to reallocate where we were going to put our next manufacturing plant. And finding those more favorable terms, getting the site selection, making sure that you have necessary permits, access to the resources you need, utilities, making sure you can get the building, making sure you can get your manufacturing stood up. You finally have that last question of, who am I going to employ to run this? Because not only does China have the manufacturing, but they also, the manufacturing site set up currently, they also have a very strong bench of talented materials engineers that are exceptional at what they do. So it's not just we have where we can make it, we have the people that can help design and work with you to make it better. Make version 2 better than version 1, and version 3 is going to be better than both of them. So that's the other challenge too, as you look to stand up your manufacturing site, is where can I staff it with the talent pool that I need?
Yes. And by the way, your first thought, Corey, if you and I were moving a factory back from China, we say, we want to do it in a state that's friendly to business. Okay. And there's a lot of those states that are very attracted to business. Is that an empty state? Is a state that says, hey, we're open for business and we won't tax you for the next 20 years, Corey? Corey's that check the box. Now, what might happen is you might say, you know what, we can move it into, you and I both live in what they call the Rust Belt. Rust Belt is still a massive manufacturing hub and arguably right behind. So I think China is probably the number one manufacturer in the world. The Rust Belt is right behind it. But in a lot of ways, higher value stuff can be made here. But the Rust Belt is not necessarily all the friendliest states. We're trying, but I think Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Pennsylvania, parts of it are going to have to earn that business. Because I wouldn't be surprised. There's always going to be the sharp penciled guys over there at BDO saying, Georgia's a little cheaper. Nothing wrong with the warm weather, fellas. So I think we're going to have a whole bunch of decisions to make as a country.
And that's the biggest thing is, like you mentioned, the Rust Belt. For century, this was the place to be. You could reach, I forget what percentage of the U.S. population you could reach within a day.
Yeah, 2/3, yeah.
Over half the population just out of here you could reach within a day. Now, looking at other states are becoming, hey, we have a deep talent pool, we have access to resources, we can now help you stand up. So now it's not a question of, I need an automotive manufacturing site. Do I want to put it in Indiana, Ohio, or Michigan? It's now optionality. And I think that's what manufacturers are seeing. It's not just that you don't have just chicken or steak. It's not A or B, black and white. You now have the optionality of, I can now pick a more favorable climate, whether that be globally, domestically, to bring my manufacturing to, with the talent pool, with the resources I need to help me enable scale in my business. And that's what we're seeing a lot of these leading manufacturers do is, I'm not just beholden to, I have to have it 20 miles down the road, even though my customers are clear across the country. We can look at expanding this while keeping mindful of that when we reference back to logistics, there's also better ways to now, I can also work where, hey, I can have a 3PL that manages my inventory. I don't need to have it on my books. I can manage something and make it work and still grow my business.
Yep. And of course, we still have, when we're removing this stuff, some of it's going to move to Vietnam or to Mexico or Canada. There's lots of potential opportunities. And I think, and I don't say this to be salesy for you, Corey, but this is why you do need a company that says, we do this every day and we know how to capture the cost, because it is not easy to capture the costs. It seems straightforward, but it's anything but, especially as you start to say all the incentives and disincentives that are out there.
100%. And that's why partnering with somebody to help to raise your hand and say, hey, I have a question. We can come in and we do have some of the brightest minds in some very bright minds in manufacturing who can take a look and say, help you understand, what is your margin today? What do you want to grow into? Where can you play? What does that market look like? And how can we help make sure that you are optimized internally to make sure that you are meeting your growth targets? And that's where, like you said, you and I are operators through and through, but at the end of the day, you cannot neglect the finance piece. At the end of the day, it is an ROI. It is a cost. It is a trade-off. It has to tie back to option A makes me this much money. Option B makes me how much money, and helping define what those strategies are based on those numbers.
Yep. Corey, talk a little bit about inventory, and let me set it up for you for a second. For my whole career, I worried about inventory. It was always, how do we minimize inventory? You hear the automotive plants say just-in-time inventory, meaning I'm going to do a lot of LTLs. I'll get an LTL delivering to me every single day rather than holding inventory in excess at a plant. And I can tell you, automotives has to really focus on that. But then we started having some of our supply chains stretched out across the world. And during COVID, we realized, oh man, maybe I need to carry a little more inventory. And I think we saw a lot of retailers get screwed up because they said, I don't know when the next time I'm going to get a shipment. So I'm going to order those winter jackets, a whole bunch of them. And then they got those winter jackets in May. And they had to carry that inventory. Hopefully the fashion doesn't change until the next year. And so we saw that took, I think, years for them to work through the inventory challenges. I can say with automotive, I have shipped things back and forth to China in the past where I would call my counterpart in China and say, yeah, you're going to receive a shipment. It's obsolete. We made some changes. We'll send you another batch. Scrap what we sent you. And that is the problem with having a month on the ocean and a few weeks in the ports. And automotive's unique, but so is retail. Every situation is unique. How are companies looking at inventory today when we don't know? I'll call it tariff shock. I don't know when it's going to be fixed. By the way, I do believe we're getting clarity. We're talking today on July 9th. We're starting to get some clarity, but I got to think there's a lot of people clenching, wondering, do I order excess inventory and take that hit financially, or do I roll the dice?
No, and that's a great question. I remember before I joined BDO, working with one of my clients in the automotive space, and this was during the peak delays at the port, and we're sitting there and we were watching the GPS tracking of very necessary raw material sending on a container ship at the port of Long Beach. And there's nothing more helpless than you see this ship and you know that it's probably going to be another 3 to 4 weeks before it gets to berth. Then you have another maybe 2 to 3 to 4 weeks before it gets off the ship through customs and to your end user. So what we've seen now, even within the last 5 years since COVID, definitely that bullwhip effect of companies were starved for raw materials, for inventories. They needed to size up very quickly. So they bought and they invested in necessary inventory to keep moving forward, to keep the shelf stocked, to keep raw materials there so that way work in progress finish it out. That's when we saw warehouse costs skyrocket, transportation prices skyrocket, because you were buying a lot, you needed to store it somewhere, you needed to move it from place to place. Now what we're seeing is, now that sense of normalcy's come back, what's happened is that credit card kept getting swiped for more inventory. And now you went from, hey, I can't afford to have 7 days, I have to have 14. I have to have 30. I have to have 60. Before long, you start doing the arithmetic, and didn't realize I now have 180, 200 days of raw materials. Now, companies are needing to react because it's multifaceted impact, because not only do you have inventory that is physically clogging your shelves, you physically cannot bring something else in.
And it's becoming obsolete every day.
Correct. And if you're more of a high-tech industry, that's obsolescence, that's risk of damage, shrink.
And what happens is sometimes there's always product updates, and you say, I ordered that widget and it got here 2 months ago and we made a change on it today. Scrap all of it that we had sitting there. It's just complete waste. And by the way, depending on the industry, inventory carrying cost is higher than logistics cost. Not in all cases. So expensive inventory is different than cheap inventory. If you and I were managing a sock business, we might go, you know what? We have huge margins on our socks and we're going to have tons of inventory and we don't care because we're selling a lot and the margin's high. Different if I'm selling something that's expensive and low margin.
Oh,
I have to look at the world completely different.
Absolutely. If you're a high-tech manufacturer and your lead times are 200 days and it takes you 80 to 90 days to bring it in, and you're managing obsolescence, you're managing very expensive product that have a high carrying cost. Not only that, but your working capital that you need for reinvestment in staff, reinvestment in a new facility is now tied up in the inventory. So we've seen a lot of conversations focused with finance leaders, and this is where the supply chain logistics piece comes in. I believe I have too much inventory. I think that's why I don't have the capital I need to grow my business. What are some measures that I can do and implement today to make sure this doesn't happen again? So that's where a lot of these manufacturers, through acquisitions, there's different ERP systems in play, helping stand up some sort of data ecosystem where I can help make better informed decisions. So I can put the pause on, hey, I don't need to buy more inventory. I've got 200 days. I need to burn through this. Helping establish policies and procedures and procurement of here's what your policies need to do as you buy at a tactical level versus more strategic category management, helping to negotiate and making sure that you're in a better place internally, because you're absolutely right. With retail, you do have that seasonality effect. You do have the ability to put 30, 40% clearance. You have more avenues than, say, a high-tech manufacturer, an automotive manufacturer would, to alleviate some of those inventory constraints. But that still doesn't solve your problems, because like you said, also from an accounting perspective, depending on how you're taxing that inventory, you've got to make sure that that you could be selling more expensive inventory at a different price and losing more margin. So this is where, and this is why I'm, as a management consultant, I love being here at BDO, because you can speak to the logistics supply chain piece with a dollars and cents lens. Supply chain operations are challenging to speak to the C-suite. The second you add, this is what you're costing us, you get some attention.
Yeah. So talk about logistics costs and the labor costs in regards to this tariff discussion.
Absolutely. Now with tariffs, companies are looking, hey, what are my other alternatives? So before, if you were bringing in from, whether it be a China, Malaysia, Taiwan, Vietnam, Singapore, can I find somebody in Mexico? Now, this is where the logistics piece comes in, because working hand in hand with procurement, before you would have to account for four weeks on the ocean. In a normal state, we'll call it 6 weeks placing the order, getting it in your door. You now need to make sure that you don't need to carry 6, 7 weeks worth of safety stock if you can go to a Mexico or a Brazil and you can have it in days or weeks. So now, from a logistics perspective, you need to also make sure that you're adjusting your modes, adjusting your pricing, making sure that's in play. Now, when it comes to labor, you also need to make sure that your staff, talking back to procurement teams, as you buy this raw materials, as you manage these categories, is your staff equipped to make these decisions, to understand, hey, what does my optionality look like? Where can I source this? And then you also need to work with your partners in supply chain and logistics to make sure. I still remember when I was an inventory planner, cups and lids, pretty much table stakes. And I get an email from my customer service team, hey, we're stocked out. That's peculiar. And I looked, they had adjusted, my logistics team had taken my cups and paper, my lids from 1 to 2 day transit and said, hey, we can put this on intermodal at 7 days. They didn't deem it necessary to tell me to change my buying parameters to account for 7 days of transit. So after a couple of very terse emails, we got it figured out. But this is what happens when these decisions are made in silos. So this comes back to the labor piece of making sure folks are equipped to work collaboratively. Because when I started, logistics was seen as very much, hey, just pick it up and move it on time. We're fine. Now, as logistics talks to supply chain now gets a seat at the boardroom, those conversations are much more collaborative as opposed to, hey, it's flowing downhill, go ahead and solve my problems. So seeing those changes, especially in manufacturing, knowing that we have the ever-present dynamics of trade, of tariffs, of, hey, where are we going to be placed? Where are we going to next? Who are our customers? Having logistics finally being able to have a seat at the table and help make some of those decisions hand in hand has really opened the eyes of a lot of these manufacturers of what a difference well-organized logistics and supply chain can make in their operations.
Yeah. And Corey, you mentioned your 3PL decided to use intermodal, and they were ready to meet you at the QBR and take a few bows for saving all that money. But what they didn't do was the math that said, okay, now we have to carry a different level of inventory. And the savings they might have delivered in one system was spent in another system. And I think we always run into this is where we optimize for our silo, not recognize when we're part of a larger supply chain. And so I think that's where you need the guys with the sharp pencils. You need the guys who say there are best practices around out there and we can help you implement them. So I want to talk about the big, beautiful bill got signed into law the other day. And it seems, I know you guys are probably have some late nights at BDO going through all of the provisions on tax changes for factories. It seems as if it's become very attractive to build here. So please talk about that.
Unfortunately, as far as the tax incentives, the financial benefits, sit on our advisory side. We do have we have a very bright state local tax team, very sharp professionals in that practice, as well as nationwide that can help manufacturers assess what that big, beautiful bill means to, hey, is it truly lucrative for me to reinvest in manufacturing? So a little bit over my skis.
No, I understand. And it's still new. So I don't expect you to give us, here's what you should do if you were in Michigan or Ohio. But I do think it's in general is encouraging investment here. And again, I think that's the tariff discussion is we're going to move certain critical industries back here. I do believe in the long run, we will continue to be frenemies with China. We will do trading there'll be a good trading partner with us. I do believe we're going to bring some stuff home. And I think anything related to security or infrastructure, some electronics, some automotive, we're going to move home because we need to. Those end up being shorter supply chains, more resilient supply chains that are all within one country are a little easier to manage. But again, there is a lot of accounting and finance that has to go on between now and then because there's a business case that's not cut and dry on any of this.
No, absolutely, 100%. You're 100% right, and it does come down to what is the financial implication. Because back when the Model T was coming off the assembly line, I'm sure that it was a few miles between to get your cast iron engine block, your tires, your axles. Now you look at even the most American-made vehicles, there's still an element of global trade to them. And from a shorter supply chain, you're not only de-risking instead of saying, hey, I have to have 6-7 weeks, maybe, hey, I have to bring it into a port, but if that port's hit by a hurricane, and do I have the inventory to carry for that? You can help de-risk it. And not only that, but a shorter supply chain is more resilient, can recover quickly, react much more dynamically. And not only that, but it's also, when we talk about a risk from an ESG perspective, If you can make something
Wait, what is ESG for those who don't get into that every day?
environmental, social, and governance, it is a three spectrum test of how a company can manage its risk from an environmental outlook, from a societal outlook, and a governmental outlook. So from an ESG perspective, using a environmental lens, shorter supply chain is better for the environment because, again, you're producing less emissions, smaller footprint, less impact to global climate change, things like that.
Cleaner and greener.
That is the goal. And ESG is also part of a resiliency for any organization. A very resilient organization tends to be a little bit more in tune with those ESG perspectives and ultimately make more informed, less reactive, more proactive decisions because, again, they go hand in hand. A resilient organization is one that can react nimbly to any risk.
Yeah, one of my daughters got a degree in sustainable business, and I was a little concerned it would be all about, hey, let's save the planet. And she said, the program said it has to be sustainable in terms of profit, in terms of people, and in terms of the planet. And you can't do just two. And if you say we're profitable and we're a great company for people, we're just really bad for the planet, that you're not sustainable. At some point, the governments of the world are going to come after you. If you say we're really good for people and we're really good for the planet and we lose a little bit of money every year, you're going out of business, and who replaces you will not be good for the planet and good for the people. So you need to hit all three. And that's regardless. I think some people looked and saw the new administration in Washington and said, oh, we don't care about the environment. Virtually every big shipper you talk to, every manufacturer you talk to says, no, we still have sustainability goals. We still want to be a good global citizen. So
you touched on that triple bottom line, and that's exactly right. Regardless, it's very apolitical. We've been moving over the last 30 some years to make better, more sustainable decisions because ultimately what's good for the planet, good for the people, ultimately is also good for my profit, for my bottom line.
Yeah. And by the way, Corey, now that we're moving some manufacturing back to North America and the US, I sometimes hear people say, I work for a company, we don't pollute, blah, blah, blah. And they feel they're on their high horse. And I was like, it's because you're manufacturing and your pollution has been outsourced to Asia. It's real easy. And by the way, there's certain industries, if you're in the paper business, you're cutting down trees and everyone's, oh, you guys are ogres because you're cutting trees down. It's the nature of that business. And then there's other businesses that like, look how clean and green we are. You serve coffee. Come on, get over yourself. Anyway, I want to also talk about, I know you guys work with logistics companies and lots of issues. We had a boom time during COVID, as we discussed. Flat to the volume isn't horrible, but it's not what we got used to during COVID. And I think margins are compressed. We've seen some carriers go out of business. We've seen some people shed some trucks. We lost 5,000 freight brokers. Everyone I talk to who's in the warehousing space talks about margin compression. I know margin compression is a big part of what's happening in the freight brokerage space too. I heard from a friend doing some research that it went from 14 to 16% margin down to 12% margin. And when we were talking before we hit the record button, you said that you're talking to some of the bigger players in the space. We won't mention names. And they're all trying to do more with less, and also concerned because the bar has gone higher and higher. And we have the expectations all changed. We used to say, yep, I get stuff from China. That hasn't changed in a long time. It comes to Long Beach or LA. That never changes. Now, the world is a little bit of flux. And at the same time as we're get that uncertainty, my margins are not quite what we want them to be. And so you said they want to do more with less. Talk about how they're doing that or not doing that.
Sure. Like you said, not only is the margin compression real, but the cost. If you're making 16% on 2,000, you're now left to make 12% off of 1,000. So the top line is shrinking, your margin's getting compressed. Now, logistics, for, again, with a grain of salt, it's been considered fairly recession-proof, meaning even in the worst economy, somebody's moving something from somewhere. Somebody needs it warehoused. So there's still opportunities. So what we've done is we worked with a number of leading 3PLs and helped define that strategy where they say, listen, we are quite aware of the market headwinds we're facing. What can we do to better optimize our strategy? And if it's a global 3PL, the process wouldn't be just taking a look at the entire globe. It's focus on where, like helping define where to focus on, helping define that strategy of taking a look at the data. Where are you really good at? And using an 80-20 analysis of where are you really good at, who are you good with, who are the more transactional customers that are just that they're there, but who are the customers that are very much you longtime customers,
My ride or die.
your ride or die. How can we make sure that we have the right resources to focus and make sure those top customers are genuinely feel that way, while making sure that you can go out and find more customers in the market, in the space of the industry that you want to attack, that you can knock out of the park and service well, and maybe focus on customers that just aren't in your wheelhouse. Everybody has a customer that they service well and that they could service better, but it's not something in their sweet spot. In logistics, that's very apparent, especially when you look at a trucking company. If you're heavy east of the Mississippi, you need to make some very strong strategic decisions on saying, hey, why should I go west? What's in it for me? So, when we talk about labor, what we're seeing, especially in the 3PL space, is we hear AI, and a lot of people think that's needing this very large organization, dozens of PhDs. AI really, I feel bad saying this, but there are so many emails that I've needed to follow up with for my time in industry that because of the volume of the work you're doing, it gets lost, because at the end of the day, people want to do good work. Having to remember, hey, 9 o'clock, I need to check on this load. 10 o'clock, I need to check on this load. Having AI overlays to help relieve that administrative burden so that people can actually feel empowered to make major decisions and make more strategic recommendations, drive value, as opposed to sitting there saying, oh, let me go ahead and download and spend 3 hours manipulating this report when, hey, I could put it to Copilot and have it done in minutes. So using AI to be I call it a force multiplier within these 3PLs, within this logistics space, to help people take the rote work off their plate so they can go do the value add. That's really what we're seeing too.
Yeah. And I think I've talked to David Bell from Clone Ops on the podcast. I'm going to talk to those guys again soon. They're doing stuff with the phones because a lot of people are getting a lot of phone calls. And if you can manage some of your phone calls via a system like Clone Ops, that's just one less guy, one less gal who has to answer the phone and say, here's what's going on. And I think if you're happy with the AI you're using on day one, you're going to be really happy in 3 weeks or a month because it gets smarter and smarter. It learns what we want. And I think, to your point, it doesn't have to be a massive investment. I think what we're going to see is agents or agentic AI. I don't know if that's the term I see a lot. Is just plugging in. I've talked to, who was I talking to? Port Pro. They do a drayage TMS. And they said, yeah, we have like dozens of agents. So a lot of their customers were saying, hey, here's the Google Doc or an Excel spreadsheet that we put on SharePoint, and you got to fill it up with, you got to manually enter that. And they were doing that for a long time. And if it's a huge shipper, you're not going to say no. They said, yeah, we just got an agent that said, we'll pull that information from your TMS, auto load it right into your documents. And I was like, a lot of clerk work that nobody wants to do. And if you can move your clerks out of that kind of work, there's better stuff more value they can add
100%.
day to day.
And like your point, how those agentic AI, the machine learning, they get better and better. Not only that, the user, through good prompt engineering, through repetitions, they figure out how to best use AI in making sure, one of the least optimal ways to use, and again, whether it's a professional, personal setting, to use your ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, what have you, as another search engine. When you can start explaining, this is the persona I need you to take, these are the results I need, this is the parameters I'm setting, please cite your sources, explain your reasoning, you'll see that the better quality prompts and the better that you get at using AI through repetition, the better results you get. And that's when people are like, hey, I didn't get plugged into this company to sit here and fill out a Google form. I do that in 5 minutes. I can go ahead and add more value to my clients and my organization.
And we're not having as many kids as we once did. So the next generation is smaller and they're wealthier and they're better educated. To get a kid, I'm sure you did some grunt work in your day, and I know I did some grunt work in my day. Younger people are going to be less apt to want to do that, especially if they go, yeah, I know how technology works. I'm at a company that is working like it's 1996. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go somewhere where I can not do clerk work. And so I think we have to create jobs that people want. And I think that's, as an older fella here, I was thankful to have a job, and I was the tail end of the baby boom, and they didn't want or need us as much as we needed them. Things are going to have to change. And then, by the way, that applies to warehouse work. That applies to transportation. We have to make the truck driver's life better. We have to make the dock worker's life better. Warehouse worker, everybody in this business has to be taken care of, or they're going to leave. And the idea that you can say, yeah, I got young Corey and young Joe, and I'm going to make them be clerks, and I'm going to bore them to death with tedious work. You're not going to keep them. It's just the reality.
No. And now people can be more selective of where they work, because one of the best lines I've heard, AI will not take your job. People who can use AI will. And
yes, exactly.
If you have a clerk position open, an AR, AP, whatever it may be.
And yeah, you'll be Upwell's using AI for that. You're taken care of over there.
You can say, hey, we have ways to make this better. I can manage that. And then, oh, by the way, I can still do more and add more value than just sitting here and stuffing envelopes. These are the ways that AI tools can help equip a younger generation to do more work better, faster, more accurately than really we've seen before. So yeah, agreed. This next generation, I think that they finally cracked the code how to avoid some of that grunt work that you and I had to do when we were in our younger days.
One of my daughters had an internship at a big auto company, and my daughter was in finance, but her roommate for the summer was an engineering person. And this big auto company gave her this project and said, this is what you'll be doing all summer. Within a week or two, she had developed a program that she sold the patent to the company and basically eliminated her job. And I was thinking, yeah, so they've deemed this a job that we're going to give to a high-performing intern. And that high-performing intern said, this is not a job for me. This is a job for technology. And by the way, before we hit the record button, you mentioned robotic process automation. I have not talked about that on the pod in a minute. Talk about what RPA is doing for some of your customers.
Yeah, ultimately, in the Pittsburgh region, we had an AI CFO roundtable talking about where a number of different manufacturers were in the process of adopting AI. And a lot of people get very concerned thinking that AI has to be something that does my job, every aspect of my job for me. What AI really is about is making sure that force multiplier. Where can you plug and play AI intelligently to make better decisions and better use of your time? That RPA, when you talk about, I'm sure you remember back in the day, I remember back in the day too, when you had to fax in a bill of lading to go get paid, somebody had to sit there, process, audit it. There's technology, and it rolls up to AI Lite, but using those RPA solutions to say, instead of having somebody to sit there and say, all right, we paid you $1,500 line haul, we paid you $100 fuel, accessorials. If for a logistics company, you can have your team use an RPA to help manage to those processes and do that work. Instead of it being manually done, it can run that for you. And same thing with any ARAP functionality. If you still are having to handle manual invoices, it's a great tool. It's not the end all be all. It's like any tool, it has its hiccups, but at the end of the day, the value add of making sure that you don't need a team of 10 people reading invoices, processing invoices, you can then, and it's not like you get rid of those 10 people, it's that you go have 3 or 4 people manage this and you have 6 bright people help the company elsewhere. So that's what it's about.
I think I've also seen where some companies getting 24 emails every day from people saying, I need a price. Can you give me a price on this? And it's just the robotic process automation is creating an email. And I think you can say, I want to check it before I send it back. Or if you start to trust it, say, it's sending those messages back on my behalf and I'm not involved. And if it's somebody who say, hey, just checking where my load is. Okay, let RPA help you out. Because there's always going to be some number of people who say, I get it, Corey, you got a system. I don't want to log into it. I want to send you emails and give you phone calls.
And that's what drew me into logistics. Is I had a former CEO, he said, logistics is a people business. AI, again, won't replace people. People can use AI, will. At the end of the day, I would rather pick up a phone and talk to a carrier 10, 15 minutes, deepening a relationship. Hey, how are the kids? How was swim camp this week for them? Versus 10, 15 minutes of, oh, yep, load's still 100 miles out, macro points tracking it. You can
why
automate
aren't the Steelers as good as the Eagles?
Listen, I've got
all those conversations.
As a Pittsburgh sports fan, it is sad seeing. It's a sad state of affairs, man. It's tough.
There was always a joke over here in Michigan that says, hey, Grand Rapids wants a professional football team, but the NFL says you can't have one until Detroit gets one. Can't say that anymore. We're doing pretty good. Anyway, I'm going to summarize what we talked about, Corey, then we'll get your final thoughts on the topic. So I'm talking to my friend Corey DeSantis, finally, after a few years of talking about it. And I'm talking to Corey about navigating the numbers, tariffs, AI, and the future of supply chain. And we started their conversation with, we had COVID. It disrupted our whole world. But it was some financially very good times for the logistics space. Difficult on the manufacturers, distributors, all the companies that we were supporting, not doing so well. What we learned is we want more resilience. We saw some brittleness in our supply chains, and we said, the bar keeps getting higher, what customers want. And we saw a little bit of brittleness, not bad, but we can do better. We want shorter supply chains, more reliable supply chains. We've been decoupling from China for a few years. They're not the lowest cost. There's some other security issues. So we have been moving in that direction. This tariff discussion with the new administration in Washington is pushing us more on that. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some more activity of us moving our supply chains out of China. I don't think we'll ever move all of them. But when we're moving supply chains, there's a lot of things we need to consider. There's the inventory, the logistics, the workforce, the facilities. Is it existing capacity? Are we going to need new partners in new countries? All of this has risk in it. That's where BDO comes in. You guys are working with a lot of companies, helping them make these difficult decisions, make the right decisions. We also talk about logistics costs, or logistics in general. Not been a good business for the last 3 years, and we don't know when the market's going to get back to where it belongs. But in the meantime, margins are down, and companies are looking for solutions. They're looking towards AI. They're looking for automations that can help them get through this and make more money. Because ultimately, when we see the margins compress, I don't think we're ever going to see a time where there's big fat margins again. I think the only way you're going to get fat margins is through doing more with less. And I think that means an investment in technology. But Corey, you said it doesn't have to be a whole thing. There are little agentic AI solutions. Start small, start getting those incremental wins. Don't make it a 6-month project, make it a 6-week project. Get started. Anyway, enough of my blather. Put a big old bow on this one, Corey DeSantis.
Absolutely. No, so ultimately, logistics has to be a part of the supply chain, which now they need to be a conversation with the finance leaders and the leaders of the C-suite leaders. You as an executive, whether it be in logistics, supply chain, within that C-suite, it needs to be a cross-collaborative conversation. And more importantly, you need to be able to answer the question of, am I winning or losing the day? Logistics is a great litmus test of, am I winning or losing? because from there you can help make better informed decisions. And then that can help drive the conversation of how can I make even better data informed decisions within my organization to help enable that scale and help drive profit.
Excellent. Excellent. Corey, what I'll do is I'll make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, any of the links you and your go-to-market team give me. I will put those in the show notes so people can reach out and talk to you. One more time, who are you working with? Who are your customers? And what, not just you, but the whole company, who are you working with and what problems are you solving for those customers that you work with?
Sure. No, so I hate to say it, but BDO has one of the best taglines, those who know BDO. We work with leading organizations across a wide variety of industries. I personally specialize with manufacturing within about, like we mentioned before, within that Rust Belt region. But we are a nationwide and a global practice. Ultimately, we help answer the question of how can I run my organization better tomorrow than it is today? And that's through our advisory practice, management consulting, through our tax, through our audit. We have some of the best and brightest in the world, and we help these companies, whether you be small, medium business to Fortune 500, Fortune 50. We help companies of all shapes, sizes, enable scale, and help them run their businesses better.
I love it. I love it. And I think during these difficult times when you look and go, man, I've never been here before. I've never had to look at this potentially moving out of China, potentially moving out of Asia, opening a new facility. The good news is there's companies like BDO that are out there that says, oh, we know you do this once in a lifetime, but we do it every quarter. This is what we do. And we have visibility into hundreds of these companies that have done something similar. So there are best practices. And I always say we see the same thing in a lot of businesses. Any of the technology providers now go, we understand that business times 1,000 because we have 1,000 customers who are doing it. So I think this is the advantage that you get when you work with a company like BDO.
No, you hit the nail on the head. Outside of work, I'm a runner. Ran a couple half marathons, and I've always aspired to do that. But on my own, training fell off. Couldn't really follow a program. Ended up getting hurt. It took getting set up with a coach before I could lock in, pick off a number of half marathons, focus my effort and energy in the right way. And ultimately, like you said, it's finding that coach, finding that who can help champion this and who can help focus and prioritize and make sure that we're doing this right. Knowing that, like you said, you might only have to move your manufacturing plant once, not our first time, not our last time. So make sure that when you make these decisions, make sure when you're reviewing what do the tariffs mean to me? What are my margins? Where can I improve my operations? Just even, hey, got a wild hypothesis. Is this something standard? By all means, feel free to reach out because those are the conversations and you need somebody in your corner helping to advocate for you to improve what's inside your four walls. And sometimes an outside resource, it's the best way to be able to say, to help confirm or might not be what you originally thought the problem is. We can still help identify what that problem may be within your organization and help optimize and return value.
Excellent. Excellent. I love what you guys are doing. Corey, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Joe, thank you very much. It's been 2 years too long.
Exactly. We've talked in between. So anyway, thank you so much. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.